Hi, everyone. I'm Mary Chow of NorthJersey.com, USA Today Network, and we are here today to talk about the Asian vote. Asian Americans represent the fastest growing electorate in the United States. Yet a new survey by APIA Votes showed that both major parties are having a hard time with outreach. Why the disconnect? Joining us today is Christine Chen, Executive Director of APIA Votes. Hello, Christine.
Hello, thank you for inviting me.
Christine, tell us why parties are having a hard time with outreach.
When we conducted our survey back in the summer, our 2020 Asian American Voter Survey showed that still, Democrats were slightly doing a little bit better than Republicans, but still the majority of Asian American voters were not being contacted. We did see an uptick during the last 6 to 8 weeks. But our what we've seen is throughout the years since we've been doing the survey since 2012 is that it really hasn't moved that much. And so, what we're always saying is that these political parties and campaigns really need to do a long term investment because 31% of the Asian American electorate still identifies themselves as independents. So it's everything from translating materials to actually engaging with the Asian American voters as their constituents year round, to actually inviting them to town halls and asking them for their input on various issues that they also care about.
I think one of the major challenges is language, if English is not your first language, and Asians are not a monolithic group. So you have Koreans, Chinese, and Japanese. So, how would campaigns translate all of that material? That's a significant investment.
Right. Well, you have to realize that right now, a lot of campaigns are slicing and dicing their constituents. So we're not saying that you have to translate so many different languages. It's really based on your campaign. So if you're in New Jersey, you have a large Indian population, or you look at your constituents and see like who out of that ethnic communities. First of all, starting with engagement regardless of your the language issues, right? Then learning from the community organizations and leaders, like what are the language needs, because we know that campaigns already are fine-tuning messages and actually using social media and other ways and other investments for other voters. So we're just asking them to do the same thing here with the immigrant voters within the Asian American population.
And here in North Jersey, we have one of the largest Asian American populations. In Bergen County, Asian Americans represent 16% of the population. And in towns such as Fort Lee and Leonia, that population is over 40%. What does that mean for local elections?
I mean, that is so exciting to see. In other words, political parties and campaigns really cannot afford to ignore the Asian American vote. They really need to understand where this constituent base, what issues are most important to them. They also need to understand that, once again, it is about that long term investment and that. We should consider Asian Americans and the talent that they can bring to appointments or to like different commissions and different initiatives that your local cities and counties are actually implementing, especially when right now we're looking at rebuilding this country and our local communities and the economies and really going past this pandemic. We have a lot of talent within our community that we can actually be tapped into. And I think you're also going to see the continuing increase of Asian Americans running for office as well.
Mhm. And yet there's still challenges. According to your APIA survey, 78% of Asian New Jerseyans say that they speak a language other than English at home, and 36% say that they speak English less than well. So given those statistics, what are some of your suggestions, Christine?
Well, for API Vote, we've invested every cycle in translating state specific mailers to ensure that we reached out to Asian American voters to let them know what is the process, the importance of their vote, and how it's really connected to their daily lives. And then, we follow up with one-on-one engagement, whether it's by phone or in other time periods has been canvassing to really talk to voters and to really identify those who do have the language needs. Then that way, moving forward into the next cycle, we can also identify like, okay, this sector actually does not need any language needs, but we'll go ahead and provide specific language, specific materials to XYZ, base of voters. So it's really that one-on-one engagement that we are able to continue to fine tune and understand this base of voters in your own backyard.
Now, the 2020 vote is behind us. And do you have any gauge as to how Asian Americans voted in this presidential election?
I am so excited to actually see a lot of the early vote statistics that are coming out. Catalyst, which is one of the firms that houses a lot of the voter files, they already analyzed that API voters nationally in 2016 only cast 1.25 early votes, but in 2020, it was already 4 million.
Wow.
And then when you're even looking at battleground states, once again, in 2016, it was only 333,000 early votes, but in 2020 is 1.3 million. And we are seeing that across the board, especially when everyone's paying attention to different battleground states. So Asian American voters really overperformed and were really turned out in larger numbers. But at the same time, I was anticipating this just because I saw a lot of organizing being done around issues in the last 4 years. And then also, 2018, we saw an increase of Asian American voters, especially younger voters. And then 2019, we saw everyone organizing, getting ready for the elections, but also for the census. So we've been engaging with the community, whether everything from making sure that they get counted in the census to the presidential primaries and then the general elections.
Was there a Kamala effect in the election, being that she is a daughter of Indian immigrants?
Definitely. I mean, what we've seen is that even before Kamala Harris was nominated to be part of the Democrat ticket, Asian Americans, when they run for office, we see that the Asian American voters that they engage and reach out to actually get more excited and then tune in and actually participate at higher levels. So specifically for this presidential election, we saw that the Indian American community and South Asian community got a lot more organized, and they were participating not only as donors, but also organizing on the ground. But we also saw immigrant voters, right? Because it's not only about her being a South Asian or Indian American candidate, but also that she comes from immigrant families, and that immigrant families feel like they could go ahead and relate to her, and that they feel like they have someone that will understand the experience of the immigrant families.
Now, you talk about immigrant families. Myself being an immigrant and my family being immigrants and English language learners, United States does not make voting easy. So how can we lessen the burden for people whose first language is not English?
Right. Well, unfortunately, as we all learned the last few weeks, it is very state specific, right? And so, what we need to do is that the work continues after Election Day, that we need to continue to work with our local jurisdictions to try to eliminate barriers and to also advocate, especially in New Jersey's, where you have certain populations with a growing API population. We need to identify are there language needs? Can we work with them to figure out if we could translate materials? Also create videos, especially now this day and age when we're so visual, right? It is also about making like same day voter registration available, really educating individuals now about mail-in and absentee. I think in the past, there wasn't as much of an emphasis, but because once again, with the pandemic, what was already provided was really expanded, right? And I would also have to say, we need to also learn from states like on the West Coast, Washington, Oregon, California. For the longest time, they've been doing same day voter registration, also mail in ballots. And what we've seen is that increased voter participation. Same thing with Minnesota, where we have the Hmong community. They have like one of the largest participation rates among the Asian voter population. But part of it is because there's less barriers in Minnesota.
What are some of the top issues that Asian Americans care about?
It actually is quite similar to the general public, with the health being the top issue, jobs and economy. But at the same time, what we did see this round compared to previous cycles is that the issues of racial equity, and especially for the younger generation, environment is a large issue. And we also see gun control continue to pop up as a priority for this community as well. So we really encourage candidates and parties to really engage our voters on the issues. That's what they care about. They don't necessarily are so wedded in identifying with Democrat or Republican or progressive or conservative. It really is about how do you stand on the different issues.
Moving forward, now that the presidential election is behind us, what are you doing at APIA Votes to engage more Asian American voters?
Well, part of it is that we're getting ready to see what type of data is being released by the 2020 census at the beginning of the year. And then with that, we're going to be engaging a lot of our leaders and community organizations and their constituents in the redistricting process. So once again, it really is about delving deeper into what is happening locally in your own backyard, especially with 2021. There's a lot of great local races that are happening. New Jersey and Virginia are great examples where there are elections every year, that we all need to pay attention, especially with the growth of this community. We really can be that margin of victory, especially on local races.
Right. In a presidential year, the turnout goes up to 80% plus, and then it dips back down to 30 something percent in an off year. So, how do you communicate to the Asian community that the local votes are important?
I think in the past we were having a harder time making people understand what is the role of local elected officials and how they impact our lives. But this year, because of the pandemic, everyone is tuning in every day, listening to your local mayor, school board to find out like our businesses are going to open up. When can the schools open up? So folks are tuning in terms of what decisions are being made. So I think once again, as we head into 2021, we just really need to make sure that the candidates, once again, understand the numbers within New Jersey and these local jurisdictions, that they really need to engage these voters. But I think once again, I'm hoping that the voters in our community are going to overperform once again because they understand what's at stake, even heading into 2021.
Does representation matter, especially in and off year for a local election? Let's say you see someone who looks like you running for a local seat. Does that bring out more votes?
Representation is a first step. I think it may initially get Asian American voters' interests and attention, but ultimately they're going to look into what are the issues of this candidate and what they stand for. So, like I said, with Kamala Harris being on the ticket, I think that actually garnered a lot of attention from Asian American voters, but it wasn't just about that. They were looking in terms of what the ticket actually had to bring in terms of the actual issues and the solutions that they're bringing to the forefront. It's the same way with the local elected officials. They're going to have to be able to really articulate and engage. And once again, don't start just 4 to 6 weeks before the elections, but start now, especially in your everyday work when you're bringing people together to find out the solutions for your own backyard. Asian American voters, there's a lot of great talent out there.
And then how do you bring that connectivity in terms of an umbrella for Asian Americans, being there are language barriers and also cultural barriers?
It's true. So we're quite diverse when it it comes to identity, in terms of what Asian American Pacific Islander actually means by ethnicity, by culture, by language. But it really is, based off of the polling that we've seen throughout the decade, is that it really is about the issues. This is where they come together. They have similar values in terms of how they view what are the solutions and what is actually the best policies that should be implemented in their own backyards.
Well, thank you very much. That was Christine Chen of APIA Votes. She is the executive director, and we are here to talk about the Asian American vote. I'm Mary Chow with the record, NorthJersey.com at USA Today Network. Thank you for joining us today.